yourself and you love others and you allow others to love you, it's a lot easier to feel joy. It's a lot easier to reach your radiance.
Welcome to the Wisdom of the Body podcast. I'm your host, Heather Grzych. Here, we talk about the profound connection between mind, body, and spirit. Join me and other authors, wellness experts, and everyday individuals talk about the importance of listening to our bodies, trusting our guts, and living in deeper harmony with nature. So, whether you're seeking guidance on your wellness journey or simply looking for inspiration, you're in the right place. We're thrilled to be in the top 3% of podcasts globally. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and most other places where people listen to podcasts. You can follow by joining my email list at heathergrzych.com or by following me on Instagram at Heather Grzych. That's Heather, Grzych. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today, I'm here with Becca Powers, who is the author of A Return to Radiance and Harness Your Inner CEO. And today we're going to talk about some of the lifestyle and mindset and behavioral tools that lead to personal transformation, overcoming burnout, unlocking your potential, and living in alignment with one's radiance, as she calls it. So Becca is a Fortune 500 high-tech sales executive. She's a keynote speaker and CEO of Powers Peak Potential. She has worked with industry giants like Cisco, Dell, Royal Caribbean International, and Office Depot. And she's got an impressive record of leading large teams and hitting $500 million in annual revenue. She's earned the coveted President's Club Award 7 times, and she's a certified Kundalini yoga teacher and Reiki master. So you need to know all these things about her. She's living in the world, doing the work in, like many people, many of us in organizations, doing work with many different people to achieve a mission together. And she's also got this kind of woo-woo experience too, right? That a lot of us have, that we seem to crave, especially when we are in those highly structured worlds. And she lives in Florida. So that's where we're bi-coastal interview today. We're representing each coast. Thank you so much for being here, Becca.
Yes, thanks for having me, Heather. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So this word radiance, first of all, what inspired you to write a book about radiance?
Well, a couple things, but I'll start with just the word. So when I was getting certified as a Kundalini yoga teacher, and now I'm a level 2 teacher, but we use the word radiance a lot in the teachings. And I just thought it was such a beautiful word. And in Kundalini yoga, your radiance is the highest expression of your soul in the human body. And that's like just that concept. I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. And your radiance includes your gifts, your talents, your uniqueness, the fullness of what you came here to be, how you came here to express it, and all the gifts that come once you do. And I just thought that concept was so awesome. And I'm like, hey, we're already born with this. So it's our job to return to it because we get disconnected from it. That's like where it started. And then there's other stories too, but I'll just pause there.
I want to know, what are some of these other stories? I mean, you said there are some of these other stories. Are there any weird stories that we need to know about? Yeah, tell us a weird.
Well, there is weird stories in an aspect of the industry too. So here's the fascinating thing, because at one point I was being like called a burnout expert, which I am, but that's like not what I wanted to be affiliated with. Like from an energy perspective, burnout's like, meh, it's a symptom of being disconnected from our true self and all this stuff. But it's like, I want to be an expert in potential and in radiance and all these things. So when I was putting this book concept together, I was just finishing up a 1.5 years of trauma awareness certification. I also got certified in limited beliefs because I really needed to go in. We learn about all of this too in Kundalini yoga, but I wanted to get some specific certs. Long story short, from an industry perspective, what I saw is that even though there are wonderful teachers and facilitators and stuff, the industry wants you to stay in there. Like, they want you to stay in this. It's like, oh, you need to learn more about your trauma. What I'm not saying is that work's not important. It is very important. But what I am saying is, from a vibrational and energy standpoint, your radiance can unlock everything. So I'm like, why are we like, I freaked out one day because I had already had my yoga done my Kundalini stuff years ago. I've spent freaking years meditating on my own radiance and potential. And then I spent 18 months meditating on like stress release and releasing my trauma and all that stuff. And what I found is like, at one point was very sick in autoimmune disease, which maybe we'll talk about too, but from burnout, what I found is my symptoms were starting to flare up the more I focused on anything that had the word stress and trauma on it and repeat. And so there was a very big intention with writing this book is like, I want to be the opposite voice. I want to help people like return to the radiance and use like those the positive energy forces that are available to like be the best person that they can and be in that vibration instead. So that was like kind of the side story. I kind of got angry at trauma and stress.
Well, as one should, it's interesting, this idea of burnout and radiance, because it's all like this fire element stuff,
Isn't that
right?
cool?
Yeah. And it's almost like you came upon the positive dimension of the fire element, whereas when it goes negative, it burns us, right?
Yes. Oh, you're giving me the goosebumps head to toe.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I mean, I trained as a yoga teacher for a lot of years, and you're making me think about this idea of flipping the negative into the positive. They call it pratipaksha bhavana,
Yes.
right? And so I think that's such a beautiful thing to think, well, I don't want to focus on what the bad thing feels like. Let me focus on what I want to feel like. And it's so much more pleasurable to do that. And it's really nice. But so, like you're saying, it does seem that when we do trauma work, right, it can be really easy to get kind of stuck in the trauma work,
Yes.
right? But you found a way to kind of do both, it sounds like, which is really cool.
I did. And I really incorporate that into my work because I do think it's important to visit that piece. But, I say there's a ratio. If you're going to do trauma work, then you need to, maybe 1/3 trauma work and 2/3 radiant work at the same time, right? Because it's very easy. We naturally, as humans, can go into the pain and into survival and just opening the door of working on your trauma. This is what I found in your trauma and burnout and those type of things. It's very easy to get stuck when you're already in survival,
Mm.
right? And so, anyway, I love how you said that dual element of fire because what I found is that as you work on your potential and you work on your radiance, the only way to get there is through. So, even though there's a positive intention, you are still going to have to face your burnout. You are still going to have to face your trauma, but it's with a lens of this is going to get me to the best version of myself.
Yeah. It's like coming into your full potential is it can be an intense process. It does require your intensity, right? To transform things. And so how do we know when we're going to burnout from radiance? What are some of the signs that someone might experience that they're not having that wonderful aspect of the fire element with the radiance and they're
Yeah.
going into maybe an unhealthy relationship with it?
So I have a framework that I call the pyramid of unpotential, but to spare going into all 5 levels, and maybe we'll get there and talk about it. What I do want to do, of course, my dog starts moving. So real life people, like if you're picking up my dog, she moved. But what I do want to share is that in the pyramid of unpotential, I have 5 levels of unpotential, right? And in level 2, I call it the overs. So I'm just going to answer your question with just talking about a small portion of it, and then we can go from there. But if you are overing, this is what I call it, if you're overing, how you can catch yourself and potentially prevent burnout or get it reversed is, are you overing? And I call that like overwhelming, overstressing, overanalyzing, overthinking. Because when we are overing, right underneath that, from a psychology perspective, we are feeling undervalued, underappreciated, underrecognized. There is something going on, and I call that the under. So how you can catch yourself is paying attention to the overs, and then you're going to peel that down and be like, okay, I am overworking, I'm overstressing, I'm overwhelming. Why am I doing this? who or what is making me do this? And when you think about it, you're like, oh, you want to identify your unders. You might be like, oh my gosh, I am feeling undervalued at work, or, underappreciated, or something along those lines. And then it comes down to human needs. Why am I undering and overing? And that's because I feel unseen, unheard, unloved, unimportant. And that's really where the root of burnout ignites, if we're using the fire the fire talk.
I think that is a really good concept of undering and overing. I haven't heard anybody talk about that, but I think all of us who have overdone something
Yes.
or under, I mean, like you said, it's almost easier to discover the overing
Yes, it
than
is.
the undering. You're right.
You don't really know when you're undering, because, and we're just doing our best. You're like, oh, I have a project, or, oh, I got to get this deadline. Like, you're bypassing your unders. From a psychology perspective, it's actually really natural that we do that. But the overing is the outward expression of that. So you're just, like you said, you're just going to catch yourself. You're like, oh my God, I overdid it again. I did all the overs. I did them all. And I've been doing them for months. And now I have no energy. I feel burnt out, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So one of the things you shared is your personal transformation that you went through yourself. Was there basically, you gave a little bit of background on why you wrote the book, but was there a pivotal moment or an event?
Oh, I think there's
Yeah.
always is with every author that ever wrote a book. But yeah, I mean, for me, there was two things that happened. But the first one that I want to share is I also overdid it myself. So if I'm rewinding the clock like 10 years ago, just to give some color, I was a senior sales leader in an organization. I was part of the executive board. I am married to a fireman. We have two kids from previous marriages. So we have the whole blended family thing going on. And in 10 years ago, all of our kids are the same age, coincidentally, and they were all in middle school. So if you look at Becca's plate, like I've got, I'm lead, I've got aggressive sales goals. I'm on an executive board. I've got a team of people that report to me. I've got a team of people that report to me at home. I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I just had all these things going, and talk about overwhelming, overstressing, thinking, over analyzing. I mean, I was doing this on a daily basis. And one day I was on like my fourth bad day in a row, and I came home from work. And, to the listeners, and this is probably very, very relatable to most listeners, because there's a moment where we've all done this, but I was running so empty that like I had to like pep talk myself to go inside to be a good mom. Like I literally was like, I've got nothing to give. I knew I had nothing to give. And I'm like, I can do this. I can go inside. I got this. I knew all four kids were home, and I'm like, I got this. And I put my purse on my right shoulder, and I walk in, I put my best smile on. I'm like, hey. And as soon as I walk through the door, the kids are middle school kids. They're like, Mom, I need you to sign this. And Mom, and I'm like, lost my cool. I was like, can I put my freaking purse down? But I didn't say freaking, right? Like I lost it. And the thing about this story is, when you see middle school age kids get sad, you know you messed up. I saw their demeanor change. I saw everything change. And so that night when I was going to bed, that moment like devastated me. But that night when I was going to bed, I was looking at myself in the mirror. And as I made eye contact with myself, I no longer recognized the woman that was staring at myself. I wasn't the mother I wanted to be, the wife I wanted to be, the leader. And the thought of that crushed me. And I had an emotional collapse on the bathroom floor. So I call it my bathroom floor moment. And here I am laying on the bathroom floor. In an outer perspective, I look like this powerful businesswoman who has it all together. I've got the husband, the kids, the this, the car, the house, all the things. In reality, I'm in my most powerless moment on the bathroom floor. And so I had nowhere to go but up. And I called out to universe, God, like, hey, I can't do tomorrow the same way I'm doing today. And I only know how to do tomorrow the same way I'm doing today. And that's when I heard a voice from within say, Becca, you're the CEO of your life. And that's really where I got my stuff together. Like that message was so empowering, because I was like, you know what? If I'm the CEO of my life, then why am I crying on the bathroom floor? I have a lot more power in this than I thought I did. And I rose up off the bathroom floor, a different woman than the one that went down. But that began my journey, my 2+ year journey of putting myself back together. By the time I hit the bathroom floor, and I'm wrapping up here, I had formed autoimmune disease. Didn't know it yet. My hair was falling out in clumps. I was already diagnosed with two anxiety disorders, chronic stress, chronic fatigue. And like I couldn't get to the root of what was going on. But the root of what was going on is exactly what we were talking about. I overdid it to the point of collapsing the bathroom floor.
Wow, that's really super powerful. One, just making me think about how important it is to just like let ourselves break down. Because if you didn't break down, you might not have had that realization.
It's true. Yeah. It was one of the most powerful moments of my life. I'm so grateful for it in hindsight.
Yeah. I really relate to that because it's like they say the kids are the mirrors, and there's nothing that hurts worse than seeing that you hurt your kid. I have an almost 8-year-old now, and it's literally like, you have an inner guide that tells you when you're doing things well or not well or right or wrong, whatever. But then when you see that child, affected by something that you're doing, it is like the most painful thing to see. So, really super beautiful story, and interesting about how I think everybody has a sense when they don't feel well
Yes.
that it has something to do with how they're living their life, though they may not be able to like really pinpoint the quote unquote root cause of things, which sometimes is multifactorial.
Most of the time it is, right?
Right? So that's why it's hard when people kind of get really into root cause work, because it's oftentimes not one thing, but it's really cool. So when you had this realization, were you able to overcome like the health issues that you were having?
I mean, it took me quite a few years, but yeah, I mean, I holistically healed everything. I holistically healed everything. But yeah, I mean, it took me 2 years just to get a doctor to listen to me. I mean, I had been to 11, 12 doctors by the time someone finally slowed down enough. And I finally went to a functional medicine doctor and brought all my blood work and all the 2 years of trying to figure out what was going on with me to start getting some help and getting on, some diets and supplements and stuff to heal me. But then the other part was the practical part that even a listener today can start applying. I mean, out of necessity, because I had no energy, I immediately had to start setting boundaries
Mm.
and start making choices that served me. And that's for a listener, if you've been like, I've been there before, or maybe I'm close to that, you can set boundaries that are more a yes to you. And sometimes that means you say no to somebody else so that you can say yes to you. And then you can make choices that serve you. It feels hard sometimes, but then once you get going and you feel like more space open up and more energy open up and more time, you're like, oh, I should have done this a long time ago.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I just keep thinking about it through the Ayurvedic lens a lot, like the fire element, the air element, all that, increase of those things, and the way that we treat those with certain herbs that have call it stambana, which is like stopping. It's a stopping energy. It's sort of like something that would tighten a tissue so that you would kind of decrease flow a little bit,
Nice.
which is
Yeah.
interesting, right? Because like you can feel very powerful and get super amped up when we're achieving, when we're accomplishing, and it can just like almost be addictive.
Oh, it is. I mean, especially, I mean, I'm in sales for a career, like you start to get addicted to the highs and the lows, like pulling yourself out of it, seeing what you're made of, like all of it's a cycle. And, to your point, as far as the stopping, that's what I had to do. Like I had to like clear my plate and just prioritize like the three most important things: myself, my family, my job. I had to, even at work, I had to start saying no to projects. I thought I was going to get fired because and was the yes queen. And not only because like maybe there's a people pleasing element to it, but really like I'm a fire sign also. So I'm like, oh, open that door. I'll see where it goes. Yes, yes, yes to opportunity. And that was a recipe for burnout for myself.
Yeah, totally. And for those of you who are listening and can't see Becca like I can, she's also looks like fire with her fiery red hair and her
Yes.
beautifully red pink cheeks. There's lots of warmth here
Yeah.
that we're dealing with. And especially when people have that, like she said, the fire sign, or we might say in Ayurveda, the Pitta constitution, dealing with a lot of that energy is there's a show I used to watch called The Witcher. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, I have. I love The
Okay.
Witcher.
Yeah, because he's pretty easy to look at, the main character. And there's a
Yeah.
character who's got like, I can't remember her name, the girl, like the love interest that he has.
Yeah, it's not Jennifer, but it's something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that. Doesn't she have like this fire gift in her
Yes.
hands? But it's like,
Jennifer, that's it.
yeah, that's right. If you're going to play with fire, you might get burned,
You might.
you know?
Yep.
Actually, I had this really cool conversation last night with a Russian woman who was talking about how when they drink alcohol, when they drink, I don't know if it's all alcoholic drinks, that they will have something oily before they have the alcohol. And that's also a very Ayurvedic thing, right? Because the oil has like a coating capacity. When you have a bunch of oil or butter or something oily like that, it coats your tissue. And then if you take something in that is sharp and irritating, you can be protected from it, right? So
Yeah, that's really fascinating.
yeah, and like the word for oil in Ayurveda is sneha, which also means love,
Oh.
right? So, did love play a part in this?
Love played a huge part in this, and I would say that it's really the guiding force to being in your radiance. I am a fire sign and I will always have a doer in me, but I had to learn how to love myself. I had to learn how to love myself sick. I had to learn how to love myself healthy. I had to let other people love me sick. Like there's days I could barely get out of bed, let alone work. And like my family had to take care of me. Sometimes they had to make me meals and things like that. And I've always been the one to carry not the burden, but to carry it all. Right. And I wanted to a certain extent. So I say a burden now because I'm like, hey, I carried everything. But really, I wanted to do that. And, I had no oil in my stomach, just to use what you're saying. And love, if we're just using that analogy, really became that oil in my stomach because now I feel love towards myself. I feel extremely loved and held by others. And, I was kind of forced into that position by the state of affairs that I was in. But, when you love yourself and you love others and you allow others to love you, it's a lot easier to feel joy. It's a lot easier to reach your radiance.
Yeah, we can all use more love, except for you who have too much love. Some of you do have too much love.
Too much love, peel it back.
Yeah, no, it's a good therapy for what you're talking about, I think. So, you conducted a survey. I read this in your book that you conducted a survey, your company, and found
Yeah.
that like only 2% of people were thriving.
Yeah, like just in the survey results, granted, it's working professionals was the lens that we did this in, but we had 8,000 working professionals respond to the survey. And what I really did was calculate the overs and the unders that they were feeling. And, we had a formula to kind of balance that out. But 69% came back in like full burnout or what I'm calling unpotential, because I feel like burnout's just a symptom of being disconnected from your potential. And then 29% kind of, I would say most high performing professionals are in this 29% because we are out there in the world doing it. So it's not necessarily an unhealthy thing to not be in the 2%. 29% are out in the world really like doing it and managing themselves and trying to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, 2% of people um, reported being thriving. And that matches a lot of work of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like his surveys were done like 50 years ago or more. But oddly, there's a correlation in the statistics.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. And I think that's kind of why you hear today of all these people. I don't remember the terms, like people working at a job but feeling disengaged.
Yeah, the quiet quitting. So
Yeah.
if we were talking about that pyramid of unpotential, level one would be the unders, the kind of happening subconsciously. Level two would be the overs. And that's where you can address things and pull yourself out. But if you don't address things, then you go into what I call questioning your belonging. And that's where quiet quitting would live in the workplace. But that's where
Mhm.
you're like over it. I don't know if I should stay here, like, should I stay or should I go? And then most people don't have the agency to go. if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And so that's where they get stuck in an unhealthy relationship for several years, or they quietly quit and are just doing what they can to get by every day. But I'm really glad you brought that up because that is what happens.
Or they just, have, and I did this, you have your work life and you work hard in your work life. And then you start doing extra things outside because you're like, oh, my job is the problem. My job is the problem. I need to leave. Right. And one of the things I see is like people, we go on retreats, even the idea of a vacation. Not that I don't think people should take vacations, but like, vacation is an escape from
Your
the
life, basically.
daily life, right? I laugh because I felt like, I used to have a corporate job years ago, and a lot of what you're saying, I really remember experiencing that. And even now, being like the president of an organization, I see some of those tendencies
Sure.
coming back, and I have to go like, okay, I remember this. I remember how this happens. And, how are we not going to do this like we did it back then? You know, because it's so easy to fall back into it when you feel like people are relying on you or whatever your motivators are, the goals that you're setting for yourself or the goals that other people are setting for you. But yeah, it's like the quiet quitting, but also the while I'm building my exit plan, let's do more than one thing. And then that can like burn you out even more. I found that for me,
Absolutely.
that's what happened.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to walk my walk these days because, my passion projects, I just a return to Radiance hit USA Today. I'm keynoting a lot more. What was really a passion project that, I'm in sales, so I have flexible schedule. Like the two complemented each other very well and on all of that. And they still do. However, it's getting to the point where this thing that was a passion project is very much a real breathing living business now, and I only have so many hours in a day, so I'm at a point where I have to start thinking like, what does the next 2 or 3 years look like? How do
Mhm.
I put boundaries in to protect myself from burning out while I still chase my dreams and do all the things that I love? So it's a really tricky place when you've got that and going.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Well, and so you work with companies to help people through these to obviously connect with their radiance, but what are some of the things that are accomplished with people in the work that you do?
The coolest thing, and if you even put like your old corporate hat back on, the coolest thing that I see happen is one of my biggest messages is the power of and. And that's like you can have this corporate, high performance, high stress job, and you can still go garden. You can go gardening or you can go back to dance. We are not at the point where we're needing to like compete for Olympic gold medals or anything. Like you can just have joy. When I'm talking to corporate professionals and I'm inviting joy back into their life, just do something for the sakes of doing it. I get blank stares sometimes like, am I allowed to do that? Can I do something if there's not a goal on the other side? If the goal is just feeling good, the answer is like, yes, absolutely, you can. And so, what ends up being an outcome for that is a working professional that's on the verge of burnout that starts adding passion back into their lives, whether it's passion projects or just things that they enjoy doing. What happens is their health increases, their happiness increases, their fulfillment increases. And typically, as a result of those things increasing, their job performance increases. You normally see promotions. I've seen, 2-level promotions. I've seen people quadruple their income. I've seen them grow their departments by 20% or more. And it all really comes from like breaking the mold of what they thought it should look like and then creating what works for them instead.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I think personally when I went through this, I was getting more opportunities, I was getting more money, like, as I was going through my own healthy transformation, and I did have this sense of or, like, I either have to keep doing this or I have to do something else, and it really did, so I love that you're pointing out because it's almost like this bind we put ourselves in. It's
Yes.
really tricky, right, to figure out how to have your own agency, especially if you're in a kind of role where you've been used to other people setting goals for you or different structures being created for you, right?
Yeah, Heather, I'm like over here. Like, if you could see me on video, guys, as Heather's talking, I'm like, yes, that, that, yes.
It's hard. And actually, I remember going to my yoga teachers and saying, because I couldn't deal once I left my corporate job. I could not deal with not having structure. It was actually really super unhealthy for me. Like I was writing poetry, but I was also getting on the wrong train and getting lost and like super spacey. And I remember asking one of my yoga teachers, can you give me a project? I need something to do. I asked for somebody to be my boss basically because I didn't know
Wow.
how to be my own boss.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And, I'm so glad you shared that too, because there is this space where, and whether you stay at your full time job or not, but when I was going through my yoga certification, I remember and when you go through a yoga certification, everyone's super yogi and super spiritual, guys. Like, okay, so like, I'm showing up all like, I'm very much that person, but then I also have this like extreme corporate persona, right? So they're like, oh, I bet you can't wait till you get certified so you can quit that corporate soul sucking job. And I'm like, I actually like my career. I don't know. And then, like, at work, I'm, a 6-figure sales leader. And they're like, are you going to quit to become a yoga teacher? Like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, how are you going to eat? I'm
Yep.
like, and I felt that either or that you're talking about. It's just a funny story, but it's a good illustration. I felt that tug of like, do I have to choose to be a yogi? Do I have to choose corporate? And that's when I chose and I'm like, I can be a career badass and I can be a really spiritual yogi. And that's really cool. And I gave myself permission to be and I felt like the Grinch, but different. Like I felt my heart expand like 3 times. And I was like, oh my gosh, like so many people should do this. This is like embrace the and. It's so cool.
Yeah. And I love this idea that you talked about the unpotential. Can you expand on that a little bit more? I think you kind of alluded to it, but what is unpotential?
Well, when I was doing all my research for the book and prior to the book, when I was really going down my certifications for trauma awareness and limited beliefs, burnout is a word that I think is overused and it's fine to describe someone being not in a good way, right? But, burnout is a newer word, not a newer word, but I wrote Harness Your Inner CEO in 2020. And what I had experienced was extreme burnout. But at the time that I wrote the book in 2020, I think I might have only used burnout in the verbiage in the whole body of the book, maybe twice,
Mm.
because it wasn't like a vernacular that everybody was using.
Mm-hmm.
Then COVID really gets into full form, and burnout is like people are burnout experts now, and burnout, 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 burnout. So
Mm-hmm.
it's good because it gives people, like, you can say the word burnout now and everybody knows what it means. But I'm like, it's kind of dangerous in one sense because it's just a symptom of something else.
Mm.
And so in my head, I deal with a lot of working professionals. I try to keep things out of the super psychological terms or the super academic terms and just try to talk to people like normal people and very layman. And as I was pondering all of this, I'm like, okay, well, if we have potential, then there's unpotential, right? And what does that mean? The unpotential means we are disconnected from our soul. We are disconnected from our guiding source. We're not living the expression of who we were meant to be. And because we're not doing that, because we are in our unpotential, then we have symptoms like burnout. So that's kind of where I
Mm-hmm.
went with the theory of unpotential because I thought it was more encompassing of the bigger problem.
Mm. Can you give me an example? Give me an example of something that would be unpotential.
Well, I'd love to. And it also was one of the reasons why I was so, it's like the heart reason why I wrote the book. So when I was born, my parents were full time musicians. They were hippies, like full blown flower children, right? Like they were awesome. But I grew up watching my parents, and I'm calling it the Radiance because their unique gifts were able to play guitar, they could sing, they can play piano. And so I saw the joy that came from the bongos and all the things, right? And then life lifed. They had me, they had my brother. And by the time we got to high school, college, they were wrapped up in their careers. My dad was a civil engineer, my mom was a manager of a Starbucks, and their music was gone. Like,
Mm.
and so these people who had such potential, and potential isn't just like how much money you can make, it's like it's the expression of who you are, the impact you can make, the joy that you give to others. It's this bigger thing.
Mm.
And I saw my parents get stuck in their unpotential. I saw the gig stop, and then I saw the depression hit. And so then we're going to really real things that are happening right now. People are have more disease, autoimmune disease, cancer, things like this are on the heart attacks are on the rise. I mean, you probably see it from your perspective and what you work on all the time. There's a lot of sick people out there that are unhealthy people, and I feel like that's because people are in their unpotential. And in the story of my parents, what I'm sharing is my mom ended up passing away at 46 years old. By the time I was 23, my mom passed away. By the time I was 36, my dad passed away. So I'm
Oh,
in my mid 30s looking at people who were very successful in their career, very successful as human beings, their flame, if we're going back to that fire thing, got messed up and it went from burning beautifully, keeping the house warm, to stifling out. And when that happened, they died with it. And so I feel that it's people are living in like a autopilot. They don't know how to get unstuck. So there's just an acceptance of this is what life is and this is just what it is. But there's just like a sadness to what we've accepted as a society as normal right
hmm,
now.
yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it really goes to like even just this fire metaphor. Like you always want to have your fire burning, at
Yes.
the right level. You don't want it, well, there's fire can be very hazardous, but you need fire to like transform food into your left butt cheek. You need fire to like achieve, accomplish, transform, carry out your daily tasks. Like you said, have interactions in the world that do bring you joy. And there are a lot of things that can dump on it.
Yes.
And some of it's, behavioral and dietary and stuff like that. But I think you're also talking about just the attitude at which you approach your life with.
Yes, very much so. And that's where I was thinking where the passion came from writing this book, because we are all born with a unique set of strengths and gifts and talents. And like, I'm just going to digress for a second before I finish that statement. Is when we are tapped into those, it's natural for us. It's so natural. That's our radiance. We don't have to build our radiance. We don't have to create it. It's already there. Like, that's why it's a return to. It's like, oh my God, what are my natural gifts, talents, skills? Like, what was I born with? And guess what? P.S. When I express them, I'm happy. When I express them, I'm healthy. Oh, when I express them, I'm abundant. Like, when I started seeing this pattern, when I was able to work with enough people to reshift this and put the frameworks in place and see the transformation, I was like, oh my God, it's just true. Like, when we're innately who we're supposed to be, prosperity happens in multiple areas of life as a result.
But we got to pay those damn bills. So we take the job and we do it. No, and also it's like we think then we blame that, right? But even we do have moment to moment choices, right?
Yes.
That give us these opportunities to find joy moment to moment.
And I think there's an opportunity to align yourself with work, even if you're not one to become an entrepreneur or you're not one to monetize your gifts and talents. You can, going back to the choices you make, you can align yourself to work that uses those things. And so, like, even in my corporate world, I don't lead teams anymore.
Hmm.
I'm an individual contributor. I mean, I do a lot of executive consultation and things like that. So I use my leadership skills, but I do it in a way that pulls those natural strengths out of me. That,
Hmm.
like, when I'm done working on a project or when I am, interacting with my clients, I am happy. I'm making an impact in their life and their business. I'm making an impact in my life because I'm feeling fulfilled and making money while I do it. And then
Hmm.
I'm also, contributing to the company, which feels really good too. And so there
Hmm.
is a way to alignment. I mean, you talk Ayurvedic, there's a lot of talk about alignment. And I just think that that's never really been taught to like the corporate person, that alignment's
Mm.
also available in your work.
Yeah. No, it's like I have one kid and four kids, managing a team, like all the things that you listed that you were dealing with before. I didn't know you had four kids, first of all. When you said that, I was like, whoa. I mean, because
Yeah.
I can't even imagine doing all that with one kid. Because when I was going through that period of my life, I didn't even have kids. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
lot. Cool. Well, I'm glad that you've been able to figure out how to make it work for you. And it seems like everybody, right, is going to have to figure out how to do that for themselves. And yeah, okay. So final question here.
Yes.
What does the wisdom of the body mean to you?
Ooh. The wisdom of the body, what does that mean to me? It means that we have this beautiful, innate part of us that is looking to teach us and communicate with us all the time. I'm so glad you asked that question because had I listened to my body, I would never have ended on the bathroom floor because my body started reacting months, if not a year before I collapsed.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. Listen to your boss at work and listen to your body. Okay. No,
That's
which we
funny.
do forget, it's like, all right, thank you. Or if you're your own boss, listen to your own boss in your head and listen to your body, please.
Yeah.
There's actually a saying that, all my teachers used to say this in Ayurveda school was like, when a conflict arises between the desires of your mind and the desires of your body, you let the body win.
Ooh, that just gave me the goosebumps from head to toe.
That's
Wow.
hard to do oftentimes, especially when we feel like people are relying us. But that one really hit me too when I first heard it. So thank you so much for being here today. Please tell the audience, Becca, how they can find you, your books, and if they want to bring you in to get involved in their efforts and your coaching work.
Yeah, thank you. So all of it can be found at beccapowers.com if you're interested in bringing me in to speak to your organization, if you want to get your hands on the book. The power method is the framework that I use to take you from where you are into your radiance. So that's all in the book. It's on audio too. And Heather, thank you so much for having me. This was such a great conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. And the topic is a very important one for our current culture. So thanks for doing the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
If you are embarking on a fertility journey and are ready to have your mind blown about what your body is really capable of and how it's impacted by the environment, then check out my book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. You can actually download the introduction to the book for free on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. Read the intro for free and then buy the rest of this fertility enlightening book pretty much anywhere books are sold.
Feeling like there's just not enough time in the day? You're not alone. Many of my clients, like Jessica, come to me overwhelmed, struggling and feeling the effects of aging. After just a few Ayurvedic sessions, Jessica was sleeping better, her digestion was regular, and she felt her vitality again. Ayurveda isn't about adding more to your plate. It's about creating balance so you can make time for what matters. Ready to reset your health and your life? Visit heathergrzych.com and book your consultation today.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.